if you have ever felt like, oh my goodness, everything I eat is making me sick, like there is something wrong with every single thing that I'm eating. If you are struggling with food intolerances and food sensitivities, and you feel like one day you can eat something and then the very next day you feel like the next day you eat that exact same food, maybe even leftovers, and then all of a sudden you feel like, oh my gosh, I feel so sick. Why is this happening? If you are wondering what is going on, I just want to share with you something that took me, I've been struggling with this since 2019. So if you have been struggling with this, you may not just have food sensitivities and intolerances, it might be a different culprit, and that culprit is histamine intolerance. And I want to cut through some of the things that you may be experiencing to help you find some relief while experiencing these terrible symptoms, which vary from person to person. Isn't that crazy? Anyways, stay tuned if you want a little bit more insight and some helpful tips on how to manage histamine intolerance. And this subject is so deep, and I have been teasing on the podcast over and over that I was going to share some of my own health struggles that I've been going through, and I'm literally sharing this to help someone, and hopefully it can cut the learning curve for you a lot shorter than it was for me. It took me years to get to this place. So what is histamine? First, let's talk about that. Histamine is a naturally occurring, it's part of your immune response, and it's also a naturally occurring neurotransmitter. You need this for a myriad of things, and everyone has experienced what histamine does. So if you have ever been stung by a mosquito or something like, a bug bite or something like that, and you get maybe some heat, some redness, some swelling, that swelling is actually fluid, since histamine causes an immune response to happen, and it mounts this response by sending white blood cells to that site. So it's literally an inflammatory response that's meant to protect and help your body from harm, outside invaders, and things like that. So this is very similar to an allergic reaction, which is why some of the foods that you eat may cause some, sneezing and sniffling and things like that, even though you can eat it without going into anaphylactic shock. So that histamine response is going to cause the itching and the swelling and the burning, and that's actually a good thing that's happening because your body is mounting this immune response. Histamine is also involved in your sleep-wake cycle, so your circadian rhythm. It literally wakes you up. So it wakes you up, it gets you out of bed, and it gets you literally out of the state of sleep. So we need this, everyone has it, but the difference is if you have histamine intolerance, you have issues with histamine buildup because your body is not breaking it down. So the body actually has an enzyme that's created within the small intestines called DAO, and that stands for diamine oxidase. And what it does is it degrades and breaks down histamine and excess histamine so that your body can kind of go back to homeostasis and be in a normal place. If you have histamine intolerance, you may have issues with this enzyme. Well, I would say you definitely have issues with this enzyme. You also may have some SNPs in your DNA. That's another topic for another video. But this has a genetic component, but it also has some environmental components as well. So think about that time where you're having allergies, seasonal allergies, right? So some people may experience hay fever, and that may look like a lot of sneezing. Some people may be allergic to mites and have, itchy skin. Some people to dust mites. Some people may have issues with pet dander, and if they're around certain animals, they sneeze incessantly and they can't even stop until they're away from that animal, or they take some sort of allergy medication, Benadryl or something like that. So histamine intolerance, what makes it different is you feel like you have seasonal allergies every single season. So all year long, it never goes away, and you get relief sometimes here and there. This is very different than an actual food allergy. So it's similar in the sense that you eat something and it triggers this histamine to build up in your system that your system can't break down. So now you're having this almost like an allergic reaction, but it's not something to the point of anaphylaxis, because the thing about histamine intolerance is you may be able to eat something. Remember I was saying you could eat something one day and the next it was like, oh my gosh, I can't eat this. I'm sneezing, or I'm itching, or my heart is racing, missing. There are a myriad of things, or I have a migraine. There are a myriad of different symptoms that come along with histamine intolerance. The reason why you can eat it one day and not the next is because this is something that builds up. And just as the word intolerance denotes, you can no longer tolerate how much is in your system because that DAO is not working properly, and your body can't break it down and remove it quickly enough before it has more histamine thrown on top of it. So histamine can come in the form of foods, and there are certain things that are super, super high in histamine. And these were things that I was eating every single day, mind you. Some of them in combination with each other. And I look back and I think, oh my gosh, had I have known, I wouldn't have been eating those things on a regular basis because I was literally making myself sick. Some of the foods that you may be eating may be causing you to feel sick as well. So what are some of the foods that are high in histamine? And then I'm going to talk about something else that many people don't talk about, and that is things that actually cause your body to release more histamine, even though they're not high in histamine themselves. So one of the things that's super high in histamine, and one of the things that clued me in and helped me put all these pieces together, were things like bone broth. So bone broth is super great. I was trying to heal my gut, and it has a lot of collagen and glycine, which is amazing for the tight junctions on your intestinal wall, and to bring those back together and to really soothe and heal the gut, right? It's supposed to seal the gut or help seal the gut. It's also high in amino acids, which is the building blocks of protein. So I was taking bone broth and making it myself and all these things. And I could not for the life of me understand why after I had these foods, I would feel as though I was coming down with the flu almost. That's how bad my body would ache and I would feel, and I would have so much inflammation in my face and in my nose, and I was like, what is going on? I'll talk to you some more about some of my experiences, but I'm going to continue talking about some of the foods that are high in histamine. That's going to be spinach, strawberries, things like, oh my goodness, which made me so sad, which is chocolate. Chocolate and cocoa powder, those things are high in histamine. Not to mention bone broth, as I mentioned, apple cider vinegar, all vinegars, things like sauerkraut, things like kimchi. I don't eat kimchi, but that's like a type of, fermented cabbage. So anything that's fermented, anything that is aged, so that's going to look like beef, right? And it was something that I literally had just worked back into my diet. So beef, and this was something that I didn't even know. It was like when beef is, after the slaughter happens, beef is actually hung to lose all of its fluid, and it's aged for 1 to 2 weeks, all beef. So whether you buy it fresh or not, it is still an aged product. So things like tuna, I would eat canned skipjack tuna, which is like some of the best quality tuna that you can get because it's, wild caught. I would eat that. That is something that if you have histamine intolerance is going to be very challenging for you. Things that are citrus based. So I'll talk to you about my experience in a minute, but citrus fruits, so that's going to be oranges and lemons and limes and pineapple for some people. What else? These are just off the top of my head of things that I've had to actually stay away from. Tomatoes, tomato sauce, ketchup, so anything that has tomato or tomato paste in it. So things like barbecue sauce, like, oh my gosh, barbecue sauce is literally my favorite condiment on the planet. What else? Cheeses. So if you eat cheese, especially aged cheese, which cheese is very similar to beef, it is aged when you purchase it, unless you're buying a soft cheese like a cream cheese or cottage cheese or something like that. But all the other cheeses are pretty much aged. And as a matter of fact, if you're someone who eats cheese, you know that the older the cheese is, the better it tastes because it has a richer, nuttier flavor profile. So can you tell I'm a foodie? So so cheese and sauerkraut and meat and oh my, so many different things where it's like, what can I eat? What can I actually eat? Gluten is another one that is really, especially if you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, if you are just sensitive to wheat products because you have gut issues, that's another conversation, then you may have a lot more issues with histamine intolerance, because that's going to cause inflammation in your gut, and inflammation of course leads to more histamine, right? So this thing is a cyclical, it's just a whole thing is the best way that I can describe it. I've learned so many ways to mitigate the issues, and to hopefully I can provide some just tips and tricks that you can use that can benefit you. One of the first things that I would say is really think about how you're affected by your foods. So one of the tell signs is if you don't have a food allergy, which means it is going to be life-threatening for you to eat something, then you really want to check and see, like, how can I eat this food and I don't have an allergy to it, but and be fine. The next day I can eat this food, and all of a sudden I have all of these issues. You might have issues with, another high histamine food is going to be things like cashews, which also I was very sad about because I love cashews. Anything that causes inflammation in the body can also cause your histamine to react, and for you to have this buildup that is just going to exacerbate all of your symptoms from day to day. So those are just some of the foods. I will actually provide a link to a download that you get, just a downloadable PDF of some of the other things that I have removed from my diet, or other culprits that I found that I was really, really shocked about, like things that actually don't have high histamine themselves, but cause the body to release even more histamine into circulation. So what are some of the symptoms? The symptoms can be, I don't know if you can hear it, you probably didn't come to this video for that, but I cannot, so for my own personal experiences and what led me here, and maybe you can relate to some of these, and I'll also name some of the other things that are super common. Let's start with the common things. So that's going to be sneezing, it might be wheezing, itchy throat, constantly clearing your throat or your chest after you eat something, post-nasal drip while you're eating, your nose actually physically dripping from your nostrils after you've eaten something, incessant sneezing that doesn't seem to stop after you've eaten something or seemingly out of nowhere. A racing heart, a racing heartbeat, that can be a sign. A migraine after, again, seemingly out of nowhere after you've eaten something, or hours after you've eaten something, because when it comes to histamine intolerance, it's a buildup. Therefore, you may be able to eat something one day, but the next day it might be too much, and you may have overwhelmed your body in degrading that histamine because you have that lack of Dao enzyme. What else is this? Let's see. Having things like brain fog, migraines, bloating, gas, upset stomach, digestive issues. Man, there's so many more. Your skin could flush and get red and even sweaty sometimes after you've eaten something, even though it might not be a spicy food. There's so many different things, and that's what I want you to keep in mind is you are an individual person, and you're going to have an individual response and experience. And what someone may have an issue with their histamine, you may not have. But some of the things that clued me in, obviously that wasn't an exhaustive list, but one of the things that clued me in was when I'm looking back. So when I would drink wine, I would have the stuffiest nose. Like my nose would be so stuffy. And if you have histamine intolerance, sulfites are going to be an issue for you. And sulfites are in a lot of canned and jarred things that have vinegar, or things, again, that have been fermented or aged, which wine is something that has been fermented grapes, right, that have been aged. So I had issues with that and never ever put it together. I would constantly have stomach issues growing up, never, didn't think anything of it. You just take something over the counter, you keep it moving, and you just, you take something like loratadine, which I had to take starting in at the end of 2018. I had to take that and some other over-the-counter things for years upon years, and I couldn't go a day without taking any of those over-the-counter antihistamines. That's where it comes from, right? So we all experience histamine, but everyone doesn't have histamine intolerance. It's going to look different for you than it does for me and for the next person. But I just want to encourage you in this. Having this information, though it may sound overwhelming right now, it turns into a lifestyle of just being cognizant of what you're eating and realizing that if you eat something that's going to be high in histamine, that you may experience some symptoms, but that can help you to know how to mitigate that going in. There are some great supplements and products on the market, and I feel like I've tried them all. I've tried so many of them, but I also experienced something that is, I'm not sure that this is very common for many people who have histamine intolerance, but what I personally experience is, let's just say last night, for example, whenever my histamine is on a 10, I have no problem falling asleep, but staying asleep is a complete issue. So I may wake up at 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm up for 4 or 5 hours and I cannot sleep because I feel like my adrenaline is pumping. And this really only happens whenever I have that excess of histamine. So I've heard histamine intolerance being described as being something like a sink or a tub where there's a stopper in there, and each drop in that tub or in that sink are going to be things that are high in histamine. And what happens to a sink that continues to drip but doesn't have an outlet, it spills over. And the spillover are your symptoms. So those things are going to look different for each person. I explained what some of mine are. I can get into a little bit more of that in another video. But until I get to that next video, I definitely wanted to remind you can download that free PDF of some of the other things that are high in histamine or can be exacerbating your histamine issues, some other symptoms that are not commonly talked about, and just a couple of things that you may be able to take now to help with some of the symptoms and things that you may be experiencing and feeling. I am right there with you. Some days I'm like, I got this, I figured this out, and other days I'm like, I've got more healing to do. Earlier today, I had to take, an antihistamine, and I really, really want to encourage you to just be an advocate for your own health and wellness. And this knowledge, don't let it overwhelm you. Please let it empower you. We are all so unique and so different, but I think that when we share our stories, it can definitely help someone else. And I hope that that's what this video did for you. If you have any questions, or if you have some different symptoms, or you think that you may be histamine intolerant, I would love to know in the comments. Leave them. I check all of my comments, and I would love to provide anything that I can to help you, because I wished that someone was describing some of these symptoms where I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. And I did come across someone who even mentioned histamine intolerance, and that kind of led me down the road of what is that? Or that sounds like me. And I hope that if you are experiencing any of these things, you know that one, you're not alone in it, but two, there are resources and there are things that you can do to help your body, as it is just, in this place of not really knowing what to do with the histamines. And I just want, I want for you what I want for myself, and that is to live well, to feel well, to be well, and to hear well done. So until next time, your life matters. What you do with it matters. So what will you steward well?